All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to completely dissect a literal operating manual for engineering dread. We're diving deep into Usama Hassan's thriller profiling algorithm. Now, this isn't just your standard advice on how to write a scary story. Not at all. It's a meticulously detailed, step-by-step framework for building a highly commercial psychological thriller. It literally treats the genre like a science, mapping out the exact formulas needed to systematically dismantle a character's sense of safety. So let's anchor ourselves right away to Hassan's core thesis. As you can see here, we are looking at a diagnostic tool. This machine doesn't just spit out a random sequence of spooky events. Instead, it takes a subject's digital footprint, all those totally mundane, everyday details we all just casually leave online, and it uses that data to systematically map out their psychological destruction. It identifies exactly what the protagonist is trying to protect most, and then calculates precisely how to turn that against them. It's incredibly calculated. Here is our blueprint for today's explainer. We're going to break this down into 5 parts. First, the mandates. Second, the ammunition. Third, the machine. Fourth, atmosphere and architecture. And finally, quality control. Let's get right into it. Starting off with Section 1, the mandates, which are the foundational framework rules. Every sturdy framework needs non-negotiable rules. And here, that means a mandatory triad of characters. First up is the protagonist rule. The algorithm dictates she must be female, age 21 to 28, no exceptions. But here is the absolutely crucial part. She can never, ever be a passive victim. She has to possess clear personal agency, meaning she's making choices that actively drive the plot forward. She's got distinct personal stakes too, like her hard-earned career, her reputation, or her autonomy. And she's actively fighting to protect whatever public standing she's built for herself. Next, we have what I find to be one of the most fascinating constraints, the sister rule. There has to be a sister. But she's never just there for decoration or witty banter. She is a load-bearing structural device. She's the ultimate confidant, the one person the protagonist shares things with that she'd tell absolutely no one else. Depending on the exact plot, the sister operates as a skeptic, pushing the protagonist into action, a mirror, or terrifyingly, the ultimate leverage point for the antagonist. And rounding out our triad is the antagonist role. He must be male, and he's always operating under a concealed or dual identity. The big takeaway here is his motive. His goal is not some transactional, run-of-the-mill crime like a robbery. His entire objective is the systematic psychological disruption of the protagonist. To pull that off, he needs plausible, totally legitimate access to her life, long before she ever realizes who he truly is. Moving on to Section 2, the ammunition. This is all about digital vulnerability vector extraction. All right, this is where the framework gets legitimately unsettling, because it shows how a determined antagonist converts regular, everyday public data into narrative fuel. Look at these 4 primary vectors. You've got the geo-footprint, think timestamp stories or tagged gym locations, which basically hands the antagonist a predictable physical schedule so he can intercept her without it looking like stalking. Then you have access points, like business emails and a bio, which completely legitimize this first point of contact. But the real kicker is the persona gap, that inevitable distance between her polished public image and her messy private reality. That gap is exactly what supplies the leverage he needs to corner her. Now, to weaponize those data vectors, the antagonist has to choose one primary cover identity from what Hassan calls the Mask Taxonomy. This is how he casually bypasses her defenses. For instance, if he puts on the professional mask, maybe he's a PR contact or a lawyer, he suddenly has a totally legitimate reason to know her daily schedule and her inner circle. Or if he uses the service proxy, like a rideshare driver or a courier, he instantly gains physical proximity to her home without drawing any social scrutiny whatsoever. So, a fundamental question early on in this diagnostic process is, which single mask is perfectly suited to exploit this specific protagonist's digital vulnerabilities? The algorithm strongly insists on choosing just one primary mask per story. Why? Because mixing them up just creates muddy confusion. Sticking to one mask creates that laser-focused, suffocating psychological depth that makes a thriller actually work. Section 3. The machine. Let's look at the 4-phase escalation algorithm. Okay, once the character profiles and their data vectors are locked in, we turn the machine on. This 4-phase escalation is strictly sequential and cumulative. It fundamentally changes the nature of the threat at every single step. It kicks off with Step 1, a low-friction digital cold contact. Think of a too-good-to-be-true brand deal that makes her feel validated, not suspicious. Step 2,
crosses the terrifying line into her physical world. Suddenly, he's showing up at locations she's posted online. Step 3 is the squeeze. This is where he leverages the sister to prove he can cause deep damage without even touching the protagonist, basically destroying her ability to handle this quietly. And finally, step 4 isolates her entirely, completely springing the trap.
Section 4, Atmosphere and Architecture. This is a psychological tension toolkit. A precise plot machine still needs the right atmosphere, right? If you just list plot beats, the story falls completely flat. You have to craft the tension. The framework gives us a toolkit specifically designed to make the reader squirm. Take the weaponized compliment. The antagonist flatters her, but the compliment itself doubles as chilling evidence of surveillance. He's praising exactly what he's been secretly watching, so the protagonist feels this deep dread before she can even articulate why. Or look at the unreliable environment, where objects in her home aren't stolen, they're just moved. It creates this profound sense of sensory dread and a compressed interior space.
And pacing is absolutely critical here. It has to be deliberately asymmetric. The framework demands that an escalation interval, which is a spike in tension or a scary incident, must immediately be followed by a recovery beat. You literally have to give the protagonist and your reader a chance to take a breath in mundane safety. Maybe it's just a casual coffee scene with her sister. If you skip this recovery beat, the dread loses its contrast, turns into a flat wall of noise, and totally loses its impact. Now, when we talk about twist architecture, the framework enforces a strict two-reveal structure. You have the identity reveal, who the antagonist actually is behind the mask, and then you have the motive reveal, why he zeroed in on this specific protagonist based on her digital footprint. The golden rule? These two reveals must never, ever land in the same scene. You have to separate them. This forces the protagonist to reel from the shock of his identity well before she even begins to comprehend the horrifying logic of his motive.
Finally, Section 5, Quality Control, the Failure Modes and Application Checklist. Before any story built on this framework is ready, you have to run final diagnostics. The absolute biggest red flag? A passive protagonist. If you're reading a scene and things are just happening to her without her making a proactive choice, you have to fix it immediately. The algorithm provides 3 specific tests for this. There's the deletion test. If you take her out of the scene, does the plot still happen anyway? There's the choice test. Does she make a visible decision based on imperfect information? You have to inject these moments of agency, or your reader will completely lose respect for her competence.
Think of this pre-delivery compliance checklist as your final system reboot. You go through and verify that all the triad constraints are met. You ensure the algorithmic sequence is fully intact, meaning at least 3 digital vectors were exploited, all 4 escalation phases are present, and those 2 reveals are properly separated. It also outlines strict prohibitions. There can be no supernatural twists that break the established logic, and absolutely no last-minute third-party rescues by the police or a passerby. The protagonist's own previous choices have to be the exact tools of her survival.
As we wrap up this explainer on the thriller profiling algorithm, I want to leave you with a somewhat chilling diagnostic of your own. Think about the time-stamped photos you uploaded this week. Think about the locations you casually tagged, or the professional emails sitting right there in your public bio. If someone ran your digital surface through this exact machine right now, what masks could they wear to get close to you? And exactly where would they find their leverage? Something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and we'll see you next time.